This is a video that I have put off for a very long time. It has been a thing that for pretty much the entirety of my existence on YouTube, I've always had someone ask me to do a video about my various shelves of anime. And I put it off for a number of reasons. Basically, just two. The first being, not all of my collection is ever in one place. For many years, I was the type of person to lend anime out to friends. Still am, really, but it's just less so now. But for a long time, I lent anime out to people, so I couldn't do a video because things were missing when I was in university. Sometimes I had some of my anime with me. Other anime was in a box at my parents' place. And leading up to more recently, I don't record my videos at home anymore, and I haven't for a few years. I am sitting here in a studio space that I rent, and the majority of my collection is sitting at home. And then there's also the second reason, is that I am quite happy and proud of the amount of anime that I have, but I have this feeling as well that there's this weird expectation or this thought that I might actually own a lot more anime than I really do. Especially considering lately, the last number of years, I haven't been buying as much. So I figured then what I would do is, since I don't think my collection is getting any bigger and the chances of it all being in one place is just like probably never going to happen, I am going to sit here and I am going to go through my collection, picking out some choice selections here and there that might have interesting stories about either how I acquired it or something about the show itself. And we're going to go through everything that I have at home, and we're going to go through everything I have here. And hopefully some of these stories might be interesting to you. So looking at the shelf we have here, though, you'll notice there's a lot of white, and that's useful for filming. White balance is very easy when I have plenty of white in my shot, but perhaps it could use a little color. Another reason to do this video is that it has been sponsored by the wonderful people at Boxu. Boxu, as the name might imply, is indeed a box filled with themed Japanese snacks. It is a monthly box that you can subscribe yourself to and have wonderful, wonderful Japanese goodies arrive at your door every single month. The theme this time around was the Otsukimi Moon Festival, and it actually comes with this fairly detailed culture guide. And of course, it's got wonderful, wonderful goodies like some tea, some other snacks. Ooh, this is actually pretty sizable cakey there. A bunch of different types of chips and chocolates and all this. Oh, wonderful goodies. I'm gonna probably be snacking on these while I film. Hopefully editing me doesn't get really annoyed with chewing sounds as we go through. And you can actually look on their website and see what will be included in the first box. Meanwhile, every box following that on a monthly basis will be themed in various different ways. Down in the description, there will be a link and a coupon code so that you can save 10% off of your order. So if you're interested in getting a box of monthly Japanese themed snacks, go and check that out. And thank you to Boxu for giving me food. It's always a good move, honestly. So how I figured we would do this is that I would go top to bottom from my home collection, which is more or less in alphabetical order. And then at the end of that, if you were still not bored, we'll come and have a look at the more choice selections that I have brought over to the studio. And you might be wondering, how am I going to show you anything from my home if, I'm here in the studio? Well, through the magic of editing, I can tell you how this is done. I'm going to look at photos that I took earlier of my shelf to remind me what's on it. And that's how we're going to take care of two places at once. Because thanks to the magic of editing, I can be in two places at once. And you don't know the difference. You don't realize how long this video took. Took a bit. I am going to be panning through these shots, and I'm not going to be stopping on every single thing that I own. I'm only going to really be stopping on things that I feel like I have a story for. And otherwise, if you happen to recognize something that I don't talk about, you can feel good that you're able to recognize something and be like, hey, that's a cool show. Why aren't you talking about it? And now you know. As far as alphabetical order goes, I do start with numbers, and the only numbered theme anime that I actually own that starts with a number is 5 centimeters per second. Eventually, I'll probably own a copy of 91 Days, and that'll go here too, but I don't at the moment. The only interesting thing about my copy of 5 centimeters per second is that it actually has the old Crunchyroll logo on it. Crunchyroll's logo isn't on many physical home media things, and especially not from this era. So the fact that I was able to actually get a copy of this to me is quite nice. Next to that is a Benobashi Magical Shopping Arcade. This is a Gainax series that no one really talks about, and there's good reasons why. it's okay. The series is largely a gag series that's very loosely tied together with some semblance of a plot that doesn't make a lot of sense, and it's more of an enjoyable series if you understand the references. If you don't, things just kind of happen, and you don't really know why. For me, I did have a hard time getting through some of the episodes of it, but there are other scenes and moments throughout the series that made it worth buying and owning, which is why I do. Getting further into the A's, we have my copy of Air, which is kind of falling apart, my old Geneon copy of Akira. Previously, I used to actually keep my Blu-rays separate from everything else because I liked the uniformity of DVD case sizes versus Blu-ray sizes, but then because I'm using weird-ass IKEA shelves, that never really worked properly, so I eventually just said, screw it, and I'll just throw everything in alphabetically, which led to my Blu-ray copies of Amagi Brilliant Park, Angel Beats, the two different versions of Appleseed that I own, both the original OVA and the CG movie from the 2000s, I think. My copies of Aria. Oh, I love Aria so much. I only have the original in DVD because I think I bought that prior to the Kickstarter, and all of my Blu-rays for Aria are because of the English dub Kickstarter, which I was able to pick up that way, and I much prefer that, because if you're going to have a dub, if I'm going to own a thing, I'd like to own all of it, at least all that's available. One of the things that maybe I might get into later in this video is when I've received a copy of an anime only for them to release a dub later, and then I have to rebuy it, and that doesn't make me a happy camper. Azazel is one that I actually haven't watched. That's one of the shows that I've owned and haven't watched. It's not that this one specifically is not one that I bought. I ended up getting that in a grab bag one time from Right Stuff, I think. It was either they sent me one or I ordered one for kicks, and then there was a copy of the show in it, and I just haven't watched it. So I have no idea how good it is, but hey, it's on my shelf anyway. The B's, we start getting into things I'm very happy I own. My copy of Barakamon I really like because of the case cover on it. It just feels nice. It's not a glossy slipcover like you'll normally get for these types of things. It is more matte and like paper feeling, which for Barakamon, that makes a lot of sense. Back Mongolian Chop Squad is a series that I own. Gonna leave it at that so I don't piss off people with my horrible opinions on that show. Then we have my copies of The Big O, an absolutely wonderful series from the Toonami era. The only interesting story I have about that is more about Big O in general. When I was in Atlanta a couple of years back, I actually got to go to and have a quick tour of the Adult Swim kind of area, and in it they had an actual like scale model of Big O that I was able to take a photo next to, which I don't know, I felt like I was overly geeking out over that specifically compared to like everything else, and I don't know if that was weird to the people giving me a tour, who probably would have expected or have seen more people freak out about the more traditional like Adult Swim things, and here I was freaking out over Big O, like, ugh. Then we move into things like Birdie the Mighty and Black Butler. I own Black Butler because, you know, I have problems with Black Butler, like, on the whole, but it is also the first thing I ever, like, properly reviewed in video format, ever. So it is kind of sentimental in that regard. I still need to get around to potentially doing a video on Book of Circus and Book of Murder, because I've never talked about them, and a lot of the problems that I left off with in my video of Black Butler 2 a number of years ago, that would have been like 7 or 8 years ago now, a lot of the problems that I have are potentially solved in Book of Circus and Book of Murder, and I do own more Black Butler that I could make videos on, but again, I just haven't. My copy of Roberta's Blood Trail is here because the rest of my copy of Black Lagoon is up there. Boogie Pop Phantom is a show that I have, and I continue to attempt to watch every couple of years and fail miserably. I realize that it is a cult classic, that a lot of people who are into that type of thing really enjoy it, and normally it is the type of series that I do watch and actively enjoy, but for some reason, Boogie Pop just doesn't do it for me. I keep trying, and maybe one year I will actually get all the way through Boogie Pop, but it is not this day. The Geneon release for Captain Harlock, its story was, I bought that for really stupid reasons, honestly. Back when I started making videos, I used to be on a podcast with a couple of other anime video creators, one of which being Jacob Chapman. And Jacob Chapman did a video about Captain Harlock, this series specifically, and in the video they said that you can't get this anymore on DVD. And immediately after watching that, I went online, found it, and bought it. I didn't necessarily buy it to own it, although in the years since I have, since watched this series and enjoyed immensely. But at the time, I bought it because Jacob said you couldn't, and I proved them wrong. That was it. It's a really stupid reason and a stupid story of me being a dick 10 years ago. But now it is on my shelf as a constant reminder that sometimes, yes, you are a dick. Just don't be a dick all the time. Though in fairness, like shortly after that, it did go officially out of print because Jenny On went under and a bunch of other things. So it's probably a good thing I picked it up anyway, because now you can't. Now you probably can't. Cue someone watching that and going and finding it. Some of the things here in the Seas are just things you can't really get anymore, and I'm really happy that I own, like Comic Party and Cromartie High School. I own one of the older copies of Cowboy Bebop on DVD. This isn't the original DVD, I don't believe, because it's remixed. Trigun was like this too, where they had like original versions and then they had slightly better quality versions, even though it all is still on DVD. And I keep meaning to actually buy Bebop on Blu-ray, but I keep not doing it because it's like, I already own it, and I'm happy and content with the DVD quality of Bebop. Not that I think that, like, the Blu-ray transfers are bad, it's just, it hasn't been enough to convince me to rebuy it yet. Eventually I will, and I'll get the stupid special edition something or other, but I just haven't yet. Then I have things like my copies of Death Note, which were a pain in the ass to get, and things like Dojin Work, which I mean to watch. I bought it 4 or 5 years ago now. I need to rewatch that. That was one of the first shows that I ended up watching in and around the time that I first watched Comic Party and Genshiken. That type of series I really enjoy watching, so I need to get around to that. Escaflowne I'm pointing out because I actually have 2 copies of Escaflowne. I have the original release of Escaflowne, and this was the Kickstarter-backed new dub version of Escaflowne that I ended up buying. Mostly because it's also on Blu-ray, and getting Escaflowne on Blu-ray is great. I have the Escaflowne film over there. I really do love Escaflowne, and its music. It's brilliant. And getting it on Blu-ray was something I really, really wanted. Also because the original dub of Escaflowne sucks. So the bar was really low for a new dub of it, and they went above and beyond and did a really, really good job, and I'm very happy that I own that now. Skipping over Eureka 7 because it's just Eureka 7. There's nothing I can say on that I haven't said in my video on it. My copy of Evangelion, you might think looks real weird because it's a thin pack without a box. Why is that? Because I bought it in a tin. It came in it came in like, imagine the Boxu box, but it's made of tin. And that's kind of it. It was always a problem when I opened it up and like all of those cases, those thin pack cases were in there, and I'm like, well, what if I want disc 5 or God forbid the final disc? I'd have to like turn it upside down and then all of the stuff would just fall out of it. It was dumb. It was horrible. I hated the tin. So I tossed the tin and I just kept the thin packs because you can't actually own the ADV version of Evangelion anymore unless you pay stupid amounts of money or get really lucky. You'll notice my copy of Rebuild 3.3 is still in shrink wrap. Still haven't watched it. I've owned it for a while. And at this point, I think I'm okay to keep at the cliffhanger that I had at the end of 2.0 until we finally get 4.0, which, hopefully might be soon, maybe. I don't know. Excel Saga I'm pointing out because it's a show that I desperately want to make a video on, but I don't think anyone is going to care. But I'm pointing it out here because I have a choice and a chance to point it out here. Go watch Excel Saga. It's freaking great. Actually, maybe not. I haven't watched it in a long time, and while I loved it to hell, it is a comedic series. It's a slapstick comedy anime. And it's still in 4x3, if that tells you anything about its age. So maybe the comedy might not land anymore in 2020. I'll have to rewatch it and find out. But I really liked it when I was getting into anime. It might be great for you. Check it out at some point. And then we start getting into the Fs. Finishing off this shelf, there's really only 2 things I'd like to point out. First of all, for my copy of Fruits Basket, these Viridian collections, man, they are not good. I realized at the time Funimation was desperately trying to save money on the physical releases of their anime, and they were really cheap, and this was really cheap when I bought it. But it's an example of you get what you pay for. The cardboard on this thing is breaking apart. I also know that the DVDs, these DVDs specifically were horribly encoded back in the day when I was doing my video on the original Fruits Basket, so this would have been like 2009. 2010, I think, somewhere around there. Trying to get footage off of these DVDs was like pulling teeth. I hated it. And it's basically turned me off of ever buying a Viridian collection thing ever again. So, not that they make them anymore. And then Fullmetal Alchemist, I own so many different copies and versions of Fullmetal Alchemist, I feel like they're not actually all here. I started collecting Fullmetal Alchemist back when it was on the individual discs that Funimation put out, where they had 4 episodes a disc and you paid $20 for them. you know, back when that was a thing. I've since done my best to replace it. I'm not sure why my copy of season 2 isn't here. Maybe I lent that to someone. I need to look that up. It is very possible I lent that to someone because it's the 2003 Fullmetal Alchemist, which I do recommend to people to watch. But my copies of Brotherhood are there too. They just seem significantly smaller by comparison. Various different copies of Full Metal Panic, Future Diary, Garzy's Wing, because, you know, I had to own that for the time I made a video on it. First 2 seasons of Genjiken. I thought I had the 3rd season. I actually thought I had the 3rd season here, but apparently I don't. For some reason, I feel like I own that, but maybe I don't. I'll have to double check. This is why going through my collection is great, because then I notice, oh wait, I thought I owned that. Did I own that? Did I lend it to someone and forget? Did I just never own that? I need to check some of these things. All my different copies of Ghost in the Shell, except for the 1st season, which again, is on this shelf. Then things like Godanner, Grenadier, Guilty Crown, Gungrave, and Gunslinger Gal. And then we show off some more Gundams, including Turn A, which I will still stand by as one of my favorites. Now, let's see if there's anything interesting stories this way. We got Gundams, we got Gurren Lagann, Hack Sign, which is a really cheap copy. Here I have the little tiny versions of Hanasaku Iroha, because I actually own the big box. This is when, I can't remember the company that does it, but they release these really stupidly large, oversized boxes and things that don't fit on my shelf. So in order to keep it nice and uniform and have all the show where it is, because the second half I just bought normally, I put that there. Followed by my big-ass box of Haruhi that contains everything except Disappearance, which my copy of Disappearance is sitting right next to it, because it's there and it doesn't fit in the box, because even though it's Blu-ray, it's in a traditional DVD case. And then I also have a Japanese copy of Episode 0, because why the hell not? It's Haruhi. Even though that is included elsewhere, I thought it was just a kind of cool thing at the time to own a Japanese disc for something. I own very few of those, so for Haruhi, I thought it was worth it. I will not complain about my bigger box for His and Her Circumstances, though I don't like the box art at all, and I do actually prefer the art that was used on the thin pack. I am still happy that I got this, like, the original release in box, because it feels more like a collector's thing for this show that I really like. This was the show that Gainax did immediately following Evangelion, and it is a very different show despite sharing many of the same creatives. There are a couple of shows that I own that I love the history of them when it's a matter of the group of creatives in the studio did this, like, kind of big landmark thing, and then they followed that up with a different show for them just to kind of chill and relax with. I have another one, and it's actually on the shelf there when we get to it. But I really love those types of shows, and I'm happy to own the big box for that one. Heat Guy J, the only interesting thing about Heat Guy J was my review of it, because I reviewed Heat Guy J and Gungrave at the same time, and I remember at the time saying that you should watch Heat Guy J and maybe only stream Gungrave. It was only like a few months later where I really wished it was the other way around. Heat Guy J is okay. It's an okay series. But I enjoyed Gungrave a lot better in retrospect, oddly enough. My old copy of Hellsing, which I broke, I don't know if I actually have the footage of that anymore. If I do, I'll try and find it and put it up here. But when I recorded my video of Hellsing, I actually threw it up in the air and then slammed it into the ground. And I think on my 2nd or 3rd take of doing that back in my university dorm, I broke it. So the plastic around it is now taped. The stupid things we do for videos, am I right? Oh, and I have my big box copy of When They Cry, Higurashi no Nakokoro ni, which is in the H's despite being called When They Cry, because I actually think When They Cry is a horrible English title, but I have no control over that. And I have the big box even though it's not actually used the correct way, because I actually have different things in that box, which you are seeing here. A nice mishmash of Higurashi related things that fit into the box nicely, so that's where I keep them. This one is also my kind of rest shelf. You'll notice that I have a pile of things unsorted on it that I need to get around to sorting, because I received them recently, more recently than the last time I did alphabetizing of this shelf. So they're just kind of sitting here because I'm a lazy person. But sitting here is my copies of, like, Promare. I got a copy of Basquash that I brought in from the studio because I originally got it sent here. Basquash is a basketball anime on the moon. It's really good, albeit a little weird. I don't fully recommend it because I don't think a lot of people will like it, but I loved it personally and I thought it was really good, so check it out. And then I have my series of Yuasa videos that were here at the studio for a long period of time because of the Yuasa video I did late last year. And of course, some more collector's edition goodness. I really am happy I'm able to pick up these things. Oh, so good. Continuing on this shelf, though, I don't think that there's much story behind a lot of this. My copy of My Hime is sitting here. I even still have the price tag on it. So even though I watched My Hime way back when I started watching anime, and I haven't rewatched it since buying this set, I still am very happy that I own it. Here's my Australian copy of Nichijou, because my English copy of Nichijou is not here. I own one. I don't know where it is. For a long time, Nichijou was not going to be released in North America. So this was the story behind this, is that I got it. I can't remember if someone offered to get it for me or I asked them to get it. Either way, I was getting it from Australia, and then I got it, and then that weekend I went to Youmacon down in Detroit, and I went to the Funimation panel that they were hosting there, and that's where they announced that they picked up Nichijou for home video release. And I feel like I was pretty rude in the audience when I was just like, seriously? Because I'm pretty sure I outwardly showed my distaste, even though I really love Nichijou, and I'm happy that it was released. But there was just a part of me that was like, I waited, and then I bought it from Australia because I wanted to own it, and then immediately after I got it, that happened. I have another story like that for something on this shelf. We'll get to it. And at the end of this shelf is my copies of Pokemon Indigo League, because it's one of the first anime that I've ever watched. I think a lot of kids in Canada from my generation started up with Pokemon. Technically, it wasn't the absolute first anime I ever watched. That was Sailor Moon. But Pokemon was definitely such a big part of my childhood that I had to get a copy of this on DVD. But it was very interesting when I bought these and I started rewatching some of them for a video I did a while back, because Pokemon has aged weirdly. I know now there was like the big news of Ash finally winning. That was in the past year or so in the most recent episodes of Pokemon. But back in the day when it first started, man, that was a very different series, and I enjoyed it a lot as a kid, and I enjoy it now for the nostalgic factor. But man, it's different. Then we have things like My Shame. I own Razafon. I own it in this wonderful large box here. I've owned it for over 10 years. Never watched it. I would say that I'll get to it, but at this point, you might call me a liar, and honestly, you may be right. My copy of Samurai 7 is interesting because I remember buying that, both because I really like the series, because Samurai 7 is great, but also because I bought it at a Best Buy when I went into Best Buy to pick up something so that I could study for a university exam, only then to proceed to not study for the university exam at all and binge watch all of Samurai 7 and make a video on it. I think I did pretty well on the exam though, so it balanced out. Then I have 2 out of 3 big box copies of Slayers. Next to it, I actually have the complete original 3 series of Slayers, but I did want to own the big box copies on DVD, mostly because the first anime I ever bought was the 3rd series of Slayers, Slayers Try. It's right here. This was the first thing. My first entry into my collection was this. So I felt the need to actually own the 1st and 2nd season of Slayers as well in big box copy, even though I could get the Funimation re-release. Technolize is interesting because this is one of the few times when Geneon released the first DVD of something and they included the soundtrack. In Jewel Case, Geneon did end up licensing a whole bunch of anime soundtracks that they would release on physical media, on compact disc, but they didn't really release many of them alongside the show itself, so I was quite happy to be able to get this. Not only that, because the Technolize soundtrack is very atmospheric, and I do enjoy Technolize a lot. It's just not a show I can ever recommend to many people. And finishing off what I have at home, we have things like Working, Watamote, the old Bandai release for Witch Hunter Robin, my copies of X, which I'm glad I own, because if I tried to get a copy of X now, it's a pain in the ass to search that on Google. Google doesn't like single letter names. And of course, the last thing here at the end, my copy of Your Lie in April. So happy I own that. That show doesn't hit with me the same way it hits with other people, because I knew the ending going into it, because assholes on the internet spoiled it for me, but you know, hey, it is still a very good show, and I'm happy that I own it. But perhaps now you can see why I was a little worried about showing that off, because that is everything I have at home. I almost feel, even though I have been sitting here for over half an hour talking about some of them, even though I don't know how much of this I'm going to edit out. I do feel like it's not big enough. I feel like there's still a lot of things that I could own, and it's just a matter of needing to get the money in order to buy it. These cookies are good. But then, of course, there are the things that I have here at the studio. When I originally did this setup and I knew I was going to have a shelf behind me, I needed to choose things from my collection that I thought were somewhat meaningful in order to fill the space. I know largely I have the camera set up so that the shelf behind me is slightly blurred, so you can't always fully see everything that's on it all the time, but I still wanted to choose things for this shelf that were meaningful, and honestly, I think some of the better stories are here. So let's go through some of these. I'm gonna have a panning shot so you can actually see everything that I don't end up talking about, but the some things that I do, hey, I can actually take them down and show them up. So Urgo Proxy. I love Urgo Proxy. I love it, I love it, I love it. I don't like this. Why don't I not like this? Because, well, if you look at this, this was the Geneon release of Urgo Proxy with all of the wonderful discs and everything, and it's great, and I love that I own it. I don't love how much I paid for it. So nowadays, since this release came out, Funimation picked up the series, they re-released it, now you can get their version for like 20 or 30 bucks online, probably. And good for you. I paid $200 for this because it was used, because at the time it was out of print and had been for a while. You remember when I said that I was a little miffed, as it were, when Nichijou came out? That's because I still remember this. About 6 months after I bought and owned this, 6 months where I was very happy I finally owned a copy of Urgo Proxy, Funimation came out and rescued it and relicensed it and released it for far cheaper. I'll eventually own it on Blu-ray, but I'm still bitter about this, and I may be bitter for a very long time. We'll see. And of course, I also have the Steelbook copies of Black Lagoon. I mentioned them earlier, but I just love these things so much. These Steelbook collections are great, and I love them, and I wish that more shows did them in this way. At least shows that fit, if that makes sense. Some shows I don't think need to be in Steelbook because I don't think that it fits. Steelbook's nice, but for Black Lagoon specifically, I thought that it was very fitting. I'm not going to drag down the whole series because there are a lot of discs of them. Read or Die the TV. I'm going to tell you that I love this series. I'm going to tell you that it took a long time to get this series, and there is a story about it, but it's in a video that I recorded that's been sitting on my computer for almost a month now because I haven't had the time to edit it because I've been busy doing a bunch of other things and planning. There is a video on ROD coming out very soon, and that contains, I'm pretty sure it contains the story of how long it took me to actually get this and own it. And I'm happy that I do, because I love ROD a lot. Very happy that I own this. But that's coming, so please look forward to it. And then, of course, I have copies of, like, Kino's Journey, Princess Mononoke, my original Baccano, which, like, is hard to get a copy of anymore. This is not my original copy of Clannad. This is the Clannad I bought after buying the old Clannad, because, as I mentioned before, I really dislike it when there are anime releases that are sub-only, and I buy them, and then later they decide, oh hey, we're gonna add a dub. And I have to rebuy it. This is the rebought version that does contain the English dub. And the English dub for Clannad, I actually thought was really good. I enjoyed it a lot. For nostalgic purposes, if I was to rewatch Clannad, I would probably rewatch it in sub, because those are the voices I am used to for the characters, but this was still very, very good, and I am happy that I own it. If you remember from earlier in the video, I showed off that I had the Blu-ray copy of Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya, but I also own the original DVD set, because I can never have too much Haruhi. What also I am very happy that I own is this, this delightfully, probably too reflective for the camera, I'm not entirely sure, box of Gankutsuo, the Count of Monte Cristo. Not only is this one of my favorite big box copies that of any anime I own, just because of the design of it, it is so nice. I paid 20 bucks for this, which I think is amazing. Not only that, since a lot of the people watching this video are American, I paid 20 bucks Canadian for this. So that's more like 15 bucks American. And it's the whole series. This was bought at the year immediately following when Geneon went under. So a lot of retailers at Anime North specifically had Geneon DVDs that they were just selling. They just wanted their stock gone for whatever reason. And one of them had this copy of Gankutsuo and they were selling it for 20 bucks. I bought it. immediately. There were a lot of the old Genion stuff that at that time even were stupid expensive. So like Haibane Renmei, which I have my copy of Haibane Renmei over here, like that was stupid expensive at the time. Still kind of is and was when I bought my copy. But to be able to see something like this for 20 bucks. Yes, please, thank you. And then there are my copies of Spice and Wolf and my favorite tournament anime ever, Angelic Layer. This one, you might notice, actually looks a little bit different. This one was bought at a time where I wanted to try and do something something a little bit different. So the plastic covering is still the shrink wrap that is on it, but we actually cut it out so that we could take the DVDs out of it and taped the original plastic back to the box. This is something that my dad used to do for his vinyl records. On the one hand, I understand why he did it and why it was a good idea, but on the other hand, there are downsides to it. So the plus side is that if I was to take this plastic wrap off, this box would be immaculate because it still had the shrink wrap on it and has since I bought it. So in that way, it's very well preserved. On the other hand, it doesn't look great at the moment because the plastic wrap is still on it and it's aging a bit, and the tape that we used is starting to discolor and look a little weird. From a physical preservation standpoint, this is great. From a visual presentation standpoint, like putting it on a shelf, it looks less good. But I am still happy that I did that because this is my favorite Clamp series and also my favorite tournament anime of all time. Of ever. It's a show that I keep regretting that I've ever done a video on it because I want an excuse to rewatch it all the time, always, and maybe I'll just randomly do a different video on it somehow or figure out something. At one point I was going to do a video about tournament arcs, but you know, there's no point in doing that. Similar to that is my copies of Rental Magica, which is a show that probably no one has heard of. And I don't blame you. The reason why I own Rental Magica and why I have fond memories of it is because there was a period of time in my last year of high school when I was in a weird depression funk and I desperately wanted something to take my mind off things. And that was when I was getting anime that was newly coming out through fan subs. And one of the things I picked up at the time and started watching was Rental Magica. So even though it's not a series that's necessarily good, per se, I still have strong emotional attachments to it because of the time of my life that I was in and what I was doing at the time. So I made sure that I was able to buy a copy of it, even though I haven't watched it since. Memories. Now we're starting to get into the things on this particular shelf that I have because they're some of my favorite animes of all time. So like the original Genion release for Paranoia Agent is here. The original copy of Fate Stay Night, which I bought immediately when I heard that Genion was going under because they still had the final volumes that were being released around that time, so I desperately wanted to grab them because unlike Gankutsuo, I knew that I wasn't going to get an actual box set of them because the final volumes were coming out after the announcement that they were closing off, so they were never going to release a continued box of that. Like, why would they? So I needed to get the individual discs, so I tried to get them as soon as I could, and I thankfully own them all now. Bamboo Blade is one of my favorite specific sports animes. Like, although Angelic Layer is technically a sport, it's a fantasy sport that doesn't actually exist. But Bamboo Blade is one of my favorite actual sports shows because it's about kendo, which is an actual sport, even though I've never played it and probably won't. Then, in order are my copies of Haibane Renmei, Moribito, and Utena. And Haibane Renmei, this is one of my favorite shows of all time, absolutely. And it was stupid expensive to buy all of these copies because they've been out of print for ages. They were out of print when I bought it. I can't remember if it ever got a re-release. I don't think so, but either way, I'm happy that I own the copy that I do because this was a series that I really enjoy. It has a lot of meaning for me. I really mean to go back to it because it was one of my first videos as well when I didn't know what I was doing, and I feel like I could redo that video a lot better and talk about Haibane Renmei very differently now that it's been a decade since the last time I have. And of course there's Utena, which I've been meaning to do a video on Utena for a very long time, but Utena is not an easy series to talk about, so maybe we'll be able to get around to that at some point in time. But if you haven't watched Utena, you're in for a treat, and I do recommend it. Then, of course, we have things like Royal Space Force, my copy of Azumangadao, which I do believe there has been a re-release of Azumanga, but this was like back before that, and I'm so happy I got it because this is, again, another one of those formative anime series from my high school years that I absolutely adore and still do to this day, because I feel like the comedy in Azumangadao is pretty universal, and I still feel like it holds up even now. I have this ultimate edition of the Escaflowne movie, which is great because this was $5. And again, that's Canadian. This wonderfully, wonderfully beautiful and detailed box for a gorgeous film that also came with a separate disc of bonus extras and features and the soundtrack. This is like Yoko Kanno at her finest of the era. I think she's done better work since, but I cannot deny that her work on Escaflowne is not masterful, and I'm happy that I was able to buy that. I would have bought just the soundtrack for $5, but to be able to buy also the movie, also in this, the Ultimate Collector set, $5. I couldn't turn this down. Because this video has been going on very, very long, I'm just gonna kind of blitz through the last remaining things that I have good stories for. Zero Experiments Lane is another one of those Genion rescues that I paid a lot of money for, but I don't regret it at all. Even though the Blu-ray release is out, and I actually feel like the Blu-ray is immaculate, especially compared to the DVD releases. I'm still happy that I own the DVD releases as this little bit of history. Two different series of Record of Lotus War, both the OVA and the TV series, because these are like classic fantasy anime alongside Slayers, which I also have here, the first season of which, and even though they don't really stand up as much today as they used to for being like old classic Tolkien-esque fantasy, it is very nice to still own it and have that little piece of history here, which is like why I like owning a lot of these, because even though I think the majority of what I've showed you today is available for streaming, some of it isn't, and if it ever leaves streaming services, we're gonna have problems. The last three things I'm gonna bring up is Nia Under 7. When I was talking about His and Her Circumstances earlier, I mentioned that there are some shows that existed because the creatives in the studio behind it wanted to do something a little bit different. Nia Under 7 is the show that was made directly following Serial Experiments Lane by basically the same team. I wouldn't say that Nia Under 7 is necessarily a good show. It is this kind of extremely chill, zany series that I don't think I can recommend to people, but if you're interested in watching something that is very different, that I can recommend. The last thing that I own, that I'm very happy that I own, is one of my favorite anime film series of all time, Kera no Kyokai, Garden of Sinners. This is not the Blu-ray released set. Aniplex did, I believe, in North America, either release a Blu-ray set, or they just allowed us to import the Japanese Blu-ray set. Can't remember which. But this one holds a lot of emotional significance for me because not only is it one of my favorite film series of all time, one of my favorite anime series of all time, but this was given to me as a gift for my birthday one year, the first year that I was living with my now wife. She decided that for my birthday, she was going to buy a couple of different anime series and hide them around the apartment as kind of a scavenger hunt thing. So I went around and I had a lot of fun roaming through our apartment trying to find the anime. And then at the very end of it, when I thought I was done, she was like, well, there's one more, and then go look on your shelf. And then over on my shelf, there was this copy of Garden of Sinners, which was not cheap, and she decided to get it for me anyway. And I am very, very grateful and thankful that she did that. It's one of those times that I was very happy that we were together, and I'm happy that we're still together. So this holds a lot of meaning for me, even though nowadays, I would probably really want a Blu-ray copy of this series specifically, but this set does hold meaning for those reasons, and I'm happy that I own it. But yeah, barring some last-minute things that either weren't on my shelves because, again, it's very hard for me to keep my entire collection in one place, or for some other things that I may have glossed over, that is, for the most part, my shelf. I hope that you enjoyed this little triade of mine through the history of me collecting anime. It is depressing though, because I feel like this is becoming less and less of a thing nowadays. I have been noticing that companies are less inclined to release physical releases for anime. to the point where like a number of really good shows that are only available on Crunchyroll or Netflix are not getting physical releases. We are getting some. So like a couple of days ago, Netflix announced that they partnered with Funimation and they are going to be releasing Violet Evergarden on home media, and that is amazing, and I'm going to buy that. But not every anime that I absolutely love and adore every year is going to have a physical release like it would have had only like 5 or 6 years ago. And the biggest problem I'm seeing with that is that while streaming is a lot more convenient, and as long as it is available, it does kind of exceed owning the discs, especially if the quality of the stream is better and you have a good internet to facilitate that. At any time, the license could change, the rights could be shifted or lost, and then you can't stream certain things anymore. The availability is not up to you as a person, and that is something that I dislike about streaming, and it's why, for the shows that I absolutely adore, I still make sure to go out of my way to buy. I will be buying a copy of Violet Evergarden when it comes out, because I absolutely adore that show. I didn't mean for this video to end on a slightly depressing note, but that's kind of the way of it when, as much as I am going to continue to collect anime for as long as they release anime, I can admit and I can see the trend in lack of releases and how that might be affecting the future growth of my collection, which is already dwindled quite a bit in the last number of years. But regardless, I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions or you think I passed over something that should have a story but doesn't, let me know down in the comments. Once again, thank you to Boxu for sponsoring this video and sending me food. The edited version of this video is probably going to be far shorter than how long I've actually been sitting in this chair talking about everything on my shelf, so having the food is definitely a good thing. It helps that it's good too. So, once again, thank you for sticking it out for however long in this video that you did, because again, I think it's going to be a bit of a longer one, but we'll have to see, or I'll have to see. You already know, you watched it. Good for you, by the way. And until next time, when we're probably going to be talking about another wonderful anime that I hope more people watch more anime, and stay frosty.